100 hours later, the main story is over, my side quests are done, and this bank is overflowing with legendaries I'll never actually bother using. And for the first time in years, I'm not exhausted, I'm content. Borderlands 4 doesn't reinvent the wheel, it just finally stops spinning it out of control. It's a culmination of 15 years of chaos, refinement, and pure dopamine. It actually feels refreshing to play Borderlands again, and much like the tagline declares, it finally breaks free. When I first booted it up, I was cautiously optimistic. Borderlands 3 was fun, but bloated. Wonderlands was clever, but shallow. And the pre-sequel existed. So, imagine my surprise when Borderlands 4 immediately felt just right. The aiming's tight, the pacing smooth, and the humor restrained. Like someone finally told the writers they didn't need to shout every joke through a megaphone. This is a game that understands exactly what it is, and more importantly, what it shouldn't be. It trims the fat, focuses on what matters, and lets the gameplay speak louder than the dialogue. Because for the first time since Borderlands 2, the excellent gunplay feels like the true star of the show again. So, after clearing every quest, hitting the level cap, and squeezing every last bit of iridium out of Kairos' crust, let's break down what I believe to have potential to become the best entry in this series. You can tell a lot about a studio from how they respond to failure. And while Gearbox hasn't exactly been a stranger to success, they've also spent the last decade figuring out what not to do with Borderlands. Borderlands 2 was lightning in a bottle, the perfect mix of absurd humor, iconic characters, and a loot loop so strong it's still being copied to this very day. But after that, Gearbox started chasing trends instead of defining them. The pre-sequel overcomplicated systems without giving players a reason to care. Borderlands 3 cranked everything up to 11, including the unfunny dialogue, and lost all of its charm in the process. And Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, while a fun detour, often felt like a test run for ideas that didn't quite belong to Borderlands itself. So, when Borderlands 4 began development, Gearbox had a choice: keep chasing the chaos, or learn how to control it. And to their credit, they did the latter. This is the most restrained Borderlands has ever been, and I mean that in the best way possible. Internally, the team restructured their design approach. The old more is better mentality was replaced with a philosophy of flow. Fewer interruptions, fewer useless items, fewer intrusive pop-ups that take off half of your HUD. The shooting was rebuilt from the ground up on a new version of Unreal Engine, prioritizing weight, responsiveness, and animation fluidity. Even in the small details, you can tell there's a certain level of discipline that just wasn't there before. Enemies are smarter, not in a they'll flank you kind of way, but in a they don't all charge your shotgun like a mindless lemmings kind of way. Encounters are paced to keep you moving, but not overwhelmed. And mission design feels tighter, with better transitions between chaos and calm. Visually, it's still unmistakably Borderlands, but the tone has shifted. There's less neon circus energy and more intentional world building, less clutter for the sake of clutter, more purpose behind each environment. It's still absurd, still loud, and still filled with ridiculous guns and ridiculous people, but for once, it feels like there's an actual direction keeping everything in frame. It's a smarter, more confined kind of chaos, one that proves Gearbox didn't need to reinvent Borderlands to make it feel new again. They just needed to remember what made it work in the first place. One of the first things you'll notice when booting up Borderlands 4 is just how damn clean it looks. For the first time, the series has made the leap to Unreal Engine 5, and that jump is instantly noticeable. Lighting, reflections, texture work, all of it's been rebuilt from the ground up, and it finally feels like Borderlands has caught up to modern visual standards. Environments feel alive, dust storms roll across Arcadia Burn, snow falls in the Terminus Range, and it even occasionally rains in the Fade Fields. Performance at launch was, however, an absolute disaster. The game struggled to get anywhere close to my monitor's cap of 165, and I literally couldn't enter Arcadia Burn without my FPS dropping down into the 40s. And while it's gotten better through various patches and updates since launch, the fact that the game even released in this state was honestly embarrassing. That's also why the game released at a shockingly low 35% on Steam. It's admirable that they managed to recover it in such a short period of time, but it would have been even more admirable if it released at its current state to begin with. This is something I can't quite decide how I feel about. While Borderlands 4 is objectively the best looking game in the series, it's also the least distinct. The shift to Unreal Engine 5 has, well, softened the edges, so to say. That thick, inked outlines that gave the first 3-ish games their signature comic book identity has been dialed back. The world now leans a little more photorealistic, with smoother gradients and subtler contrast. It's still stylized, don't get me wrong, but it's a different kind of stylized. The exaggerated grit has been replaced by a polished sheen, something more mainstream and more cinematic. And while it's undeniably beautiful, Part of me does miss the roughness. That harsh, sketchy, almost dirty look from Borderlands 1 carried a certain texture, a sense of attitude. Here, the polish makes everything easier on the eyes, but also a little safer. The chaos feels curated, the edges sanded down. It's the visual equivalent of a band cleaning up their sound for the big label debut. That aside, the attention to world design is phenomenal. Each region feels more distinct than ever. From the crumbling ruins of Carcadia Burn, the mountainous peaks of Terminus Range, the lush greens of the Fade Fields, and the oppressive greys of Dominion City. Interior environments in particular have seen a massive overhaul, with you now being able to walk into many a random shack in the wasteland and actually see the semblance of a life that used to exist there. It's all proof that Gearbox hasn't lost its touch, just some of the rough edges. Much like the visuals, the audio design in Borderlands 4 feels like the natural next step for the series. It's not revolutionary, but it's refined. Everything sounds clean, punchy, and precisely mixed. The chaos has finally been tamed without neutering the identity. Weapons still have that signature brand-based flavor. Jacob's bark like hand cannons ripped straight out of a western. Maliwan's hum with charged plasma. And Torque still sounds like a warehouse full of fireworks going off in a tin can. There's a real sense of weight behind every shot, and the mechanical feedback feels more deliberate than in Borderlands 3. Even with only 2 or 3 weapon brands making up the bulk of my arsenal across 100 hours, I've never really gotten tired of the soundscape. Guns roar, reloads click, shields hum, and all of it blends together in that trademark Borderlands symphony of carnage. But the biggest, and arguably most important improvement, comes from the voices. For the first time in what feels like forever, Borderlands actually knows when to shut up. The constant stream of unfunny one-liners, pop culture references, and fourth wall breaks that buried Borderlands 3 have been stripped back almost entirely. Dialogue is calmer, more focused, and dare I say it, more human. It's not that the humor's gone, it's just no longer screaming for attention every 5 seconds. The writers seem to have realized that restraint is sometimes funnier than excess, and while it occasionally feels like a bit of an overcorrection, I'd much rather listen to inoffensive dialogue than something that makes me want to jam a fork into my ear. There's a newfound confidence in how the game handles delivery too. Voice direction feels tighter, with fewer awkward pauses and more natural timing. Characters actually sound like they're reacting to what's happening, rather than reading from opposite sides of a padded cell. And finally, our Vault Hunter isn't a silent mannequin anymore. For the first time in the series' history, your character actually appears in cutscenes. They speak. They have expressions. They interact with the world around them like a real person instead of a floating camera with remarkably good aim. It's bizarre that it took 4 mainline entries and 2 spin-offs for this to happen, but at this point, I'll fucking take it. Hearing my own character respond to event makes a huge difference in how grounded the story feels. It's small, sure, but it's one of those quality of life leaps that makes everything feel more cohesive. Additionally, there's also not as much standing around in the same room for minutes on end. And the result? A game that sounds as polished as it plays. If there's one thing Borderlands 4 absolutely nails, it's the way it feels. From the very first firefight, you can tell this is the smoothest, most responsive game Gearbox has ever made. Every shot connects with purpose, every slide feels intentional, and every ability finally flows into the chaos instead of getting lost in it. Gunplay has always been the series' bread and butter, but here it's been elevated from mindless fun to something that's genuinely satisfying on a mechanical level. The recoil, the sound, the screen shake, everything has weight and feedback. The best way to describe it is that Borderlands 4 feels like the best pieces of all its predecessors stitched together and polished until they shine. It has the tight responsiveness of Borderlands 2, the mobility and fluidity of Borderlands 3, and the build versatility of Wonderlands. Traversal is another area where the improvements are immediately noticeable. Movement feels freer than ever, with better mantling, smoother slides, a new gliding mechanic, and far fewer moments where you get stuck on some tiny piece of geometry. Combat arenas are designed with verticality and flow in mind, rewarding movement and positioning instead of turning every fight into a war of attrition. Of course, no Borderlands is complete without its lineup of colorful mass murderers, and Borderlands 4 introduces a cast that's both familiar and refreshingly distinct. Each one fits neatly into the series' established archetypes while still bringing something new to the table, not through wild gimmicks or forced quirks, but through carefully considered mechanics that actually complement how the game plays. Vex, the Siren, keeps this tradition alive. At this point, it wouldn't be Borderlands without a Siren, and Vex feels like the logical evolution of that role. Her passive, Phase Covenant, converts all skill damage into the elemental type of your currently equipped weapon. It's elegant in its simplicity, encouraging synergy between loadout and build rather than forcing you into a single elemental lane. Then there's Harlow, the Gravatar, an ex-Maliwan scientist who doesn't spend every mission monologuing about scientific ethics. Her passive, Entangled, links enemies together, causing them to share incoming damage. It's basically crowd control disguised as efficiency. Eamon, the Forge Knight, fills the heavy hitter slot, a sort of spiritual cousin to Brick and Moe's. His Forge skill passive grants bonus action skill damage, and while that might sound straightforward, it scales beautifully with the rest of his skill trees. And finally, my personal favorite, Rafa the Exo Soldier. An exterior operative turned one-man army, Rafa embodies pure forward momentum. His passive, Overdrive, boosts both movement speed and raw damage outputs, rewarding aggression and constant engagement. He's basically what you'd get if Doomguy went Borderlands. Rafa's kit is built for fluidity. You're not meant to hide behind cover, you are the cover. Each of these Vault Hunters comes equipped with 3 distinct skill trees, and Gearbox has given the system its first meaningful overhaul in years. The layout looks familiar at first glance, but it's far more deliberate in execution. Action skills still serve as the entry point, the flashy headline ability that defines your playstyle, but as you invest deeper into a tree, you unlock augments, powerful modifiers that expand on your class's passive or weapon synergy. These are essentially mini milestones that make progression feel rewarding again, granting tangible improvements instead of minor stat bumps you'll barely notice. And then, at the end of every tree, sits the capstone, the ultimate payoff. These abilities fundamentally alter how your action skill functions, transforming an already strong setup into something uniquely yours. Rafa's remote agent tree, for instance, converts his mounted peacebreaker cannons into alternate forms, shotguns, elemental beams, or even rocket launchers. It's an immediate visual and mechanical upgrade that gives each build its own rhythm. It's worth noting that Borderlands 4 lightly encourages players to commit to a single path, at least until you unlock that coveted capstone. However, the flexibility remains. You can still mix and match across trees, cherry-picking synergistic perks at the cost of the endgame ability. It's a balancing act between specialization and freedom, and while min-maxers will inevitably find the meta, the system itself finally feels designed to support experimentation rather than punish it. And that's the best way to describe Borderlands 4's approach to progression as a whole. Familiar, but smarter. It doesn't bombard you with new gimmicks. It just takes what worked, trims what didn't, and gives you the freedom to define your own kind of chaos. Guns are back. How surprising. And somehow, they've never felt better. It's a phrase I've used for every Borderlands release since 2012. Everything about the gunplay here feels tighter, weightier, and more deliberate, and not just in terms of how it handles. The underlying systems have been rebuilt to make each weapon manufacturer feel genuinely distinct again. Each Vault Hunter is now attuned to specific elemental types, and it's a surprisingly smart addition. Take Rafa for example. His affinities, shock and corrosive, tie directly into his kit. Especially once you unlock his Beam Team capstone that transforms his cannons into twin elemental lasers. The result is that every class naturally gravitates towards certain weapon types and elements, not because the game forces you to, but because the synergy just feels right. It's an elegant way to make loot and character builds interact without locking players into one specific path. In total, there are 8 primary manufacturers this time around, and it's a strong mix of returning veterans and ambitious newcomers. Daedalus, the spiritual successor to Dahl, brings back that precision-focused design philosophy. Most of their guns are still burst fire, but they're reliable, methodical, and deadly in the right hands. Jacobs continues to be the no-nonsense, rootin' tootin' classic. Their firearms still lack elemental variants, because those are for suckers who can't aim, but now their bullets ricochet off enemies on critical hits. It's a small tweak that makes high-skill gunplay more rewarding, and it feels incredible when you line up a perfect headshot and watch the room clear itself. Maliwan, as always, is the futuristic powerhouse. Every weapon they make is elemental, and they've become the go-to choice for players who favor a bit of extra flair in their gameplay. They're practically tailor-made for Vex. Of course, Tediore and Torg are still here, and they're still absolutely insane. Tediore's classic gimmick returns: reload your gun, throw it, and watch it explode. Torg, on the other hand, hasn't changed, and thank God for that. If it doesn't explode, it's not worth firing. They're loud, obnoxious, and still one of the most satisfying weapon lines in the game. Vladov also makes their return, and they maintain their tried and true tradition of big magazine, bigger fire rates. Then there's the new arrivals. Order weapons are either semi-automatic or require a charger before firing. The semi-autos can also be charged to fire multiple shots simultaneously. It's a great middle ground between burst precision and heavy firepower, and the aesthetic design fits their militaristic ideology perfectly. Then there's Ripper, the chaotic counterpart. Their guns need to charge before firing, but once they spin up, they'll keep spitting rounds until the gun literally overheats. Just raw, sustained firepower that feels like you're holding a war crime. Beyond that, weapon mods and attachments return with a surprising degree of customization. Underbarrels are the real highlight here. Jacob's rifles can mount secondary shotguns, Maliwan rifles can have railguns, and Order weapons can slap on homing grenades for when you really want something dead. Interestingly, a few familiar manufacturers make cameo appearances through these mods. Atlas, Hyperion, and even the cultish Cult of the Vault show up as component makers, mostly in the form of attachments and hybrid parts. Whether this means they've gone bankrupt or are just hiding in the background is unclear, but I'm holding out hope for a proper Hyperion comeback. I need more SMGs in my life. Each manufacturer has a clear identity, each Vault Hunter has natural synergy with certain types, and the whole system feels designed with long-term engagement in mind rather than just novelty. The days of picking up a purple gun and wondering if it's secretly garbage are mostly gone. Hell, even Blues did their job well in the early game. Gearbox didn't just refine the gunplay this time, they rethought how players equip it. The familiar 4-weapon setup is still here, but your active kit now carries a few key changes that subtly reshape how you approach combat and resource management. You can still carry 4 guns on you at once, but heavy weapons like rocket launchers, heavy machine guns, or anything else capable of rewriting the local ecosystem now occupy their own dedicated slot. Instead of simply being another weapon in your rotation, they're treated more like a tactical tool. That slot is shared with your grenades, forcing you to make a choice. Do you want the raw devastation of a launcher or the flexibility of a throwable? It's a small change, but it gives fights a better rhythm. You're no longer juggling rocket launchers like oversized pistols. Instead, you're making deliberate loadout decisions before heading into combat. It's less about hoarding and more about commitment. A subtle but meaningful shift that fits perfectly with Borderlands 4's new, less noise, more intent philosophy. Your character's enhancements now come from a trio of familiar categories: shields, class mods, and enhancements, TM. Shields are still shields, they block damage, they explode when they break, and sometimes they singe your eyebrows off in the process. There's not much to say here other than they're more varied than ever, with modifiers that can completely change your playstyle. From rapid self-charging hybrids to offensive options that encourage full aggression. Class mods return in their traditional role, offering extra skill points and stat bumps for specific abilities. They're still the best way to fine-tune your build. The new addition here is enhancements, replacing the old artifact slot. These act as all-in-one upgrade modules that provide a mix of general stat bonuses alongside a manufacturer's specific buff. Running a Jacob's heavy loadout, there's an enhancement for that. Prefer Malaman's fireworks, there's one for that too. They're a clever way to reinforce your weapon preferences through tangible bonuses, and they feel like a meaningful part of your character's identity rather than an afterthought. And then there are rep kits, the newest addition to the loop. Think of them as a cross between medpacks and combat boosts. They operate on a cooldown, and when activated, they restore health while providing a temporary stat buff. The idea is simple, but it fits beautifully within the faster, more aggressive pacing of Borderlands 4. Rather than fumbling for random health drops mid-fight, you've now got a reliable emergency button that rewards timing and awareness. All of these tweaks might sound small on paper, but together they make a huge difference in moment-to-moment gameplay. The UI clutter is gone, except the inventory screen, because fuck me, it needs to be burnt down to the ground and reset back to square one. But apart from that, the systems make sense, and every part of your loadout feels like it has a purpose. Every Borderlands game has its own flavor of chaos, a unique mix of terrain, tone, and things trying to kill you. For Borderlands 4, that flavor is Kairos, a planet that feels like both a return to the classic formula and an expansion into something far stranger. Kairos isn't just another alien rock with bandits and bad weather, it's a world turned prison, a construct held together by the will of a single entity known only as the Timekeeper. His influence seeps into every part of the planet, bending space, time, and sanity to his own design, but more on his ego trip later. The planet is divided into 4 main regions, each distinct not just visually, but thematically, as if every zone represents a different civilization. The Fate Fields serve as your introduction to Kairos. Wide stretches of green plains and overgrown forests make this the calmest place you'll see for quite a while. It's Borderlands' most traditional zone, bright, open, and deceptively peaceful. Terminus Range is the polar opposite, a frozen mountain region carved out by ancient mining operations and buried vault tech. The biting cold makes for some stunning vistas. Then there's Carcadia Burn, easily the most striking region of the bunch, and also the most unstable at launch. Once a thriving metropolis, it's now a vertical graveyard, skyscrapers split in half, streets swallowed by chasms, and fissures tearing through what's left of civilization. The cause? Elpis. The same moon that once orbited Pandora now drifts in Kairos' orbit, and its arrival turned Carcadia into a monument to orbital disaster. Finally, there's Dominion City, the beating, or perhaps dead, heart of Kairos. This is the Timekeeper's domain, a sterile, meticulously structured metropolis painted in muted shades of grey. It serves as the physical embodiment of control. Despite the variety, Kairos still feels cohesive. Each region flows naturally into the next, both visually and narratively. The design makes exploration smoother than ever, fast travel is more generous, loading screens are non-existent or cleverly hidden, and verticality is used to its full potential. And of course, a Borderlands world wouldn't be complete without an entirely new zoo's worth of things trying to kill you. Creatures are mostly new this time around, and there are real highlights. Wildhorns, manglers, creeps, pangolins, kratch, and the ever-infuriating treasures make up the bulk of the local wildlife. Each has its own behavioral quirks and habitats. Wildhorns traverse the Fate Fields, pangolins burrow through the molten wreckage of Carcadia Burn, and Kratch seem to exist purely to ambush you in every biome imaginable. Then there are the human and not so human factions that dominate Kairos. The Rippers are the spiritual successors to the COV, a gang of mutilated psychopaths shaped or corrupted by Callus, the Ripper Queen. Her followers are every flavor of Unhinged, from knife-wielding maniacs to mutated brutes stitched together with scrap metal and unbridled rage. The Order, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. They serve the Timekeeper directly, acting as his enforcers, soldiers, and test subjects. Comprised of both humans and synthetics, the Order's strength lies in coordination. They fight with precision, move in formation, and use technology ripped straight from the vaults themselves. If the Rippers represent chaos, the Order embodies control. And as per usual, each faction and species comes with a hierarchy of grunts, elites, and badass variants. Elemental affinities, age variations, and environmental adaptations all feed into how they fight. The variety is genuinely impressive. Every region throws something new at you. Kairos is absolutely stuffed with things to do. Quests, events, challenges, collectibles, you name it. And there's probably a marker for it somewhere on the map. The best part? You can tackle any of it in any order. Borderlands 4, much like Wonderlands before it, uses adaptive level scaling. The world grows with you, meaning no area or mission ever becomes completely obsolete or completely impossible. The bulk of your time will naturally go into quests, which come in 3 flavors: main quests, side quests, and bounties. Side quests in particular strike a surprisingly balanced tone this time. Some are serious, some are absurd, and some are just you standing around listening to a guy talk for 15 minutes straight. A Borderlands tradition at this point. The real highlights here are the 3 faction-specific questlines. The Outriders task you with helping them slap together a spaceship so they can explore outer space in search of a home beyond the Order's reach. The Electi have you help rebuild their fractured society, full of political games and quiet paranoia as you hunt for a mole within their ranks. And then there's the Augurs, who have you help out an underground crime syndicate with their dirty work. Their arc plays out like a spacefaring mafia story. Even in outer space, I can't escape the old country's mediocrity. Finally, bounties return as the quick and easy XP generators of the game. They're randomly generated contracts where you'll assassinate a target, scan some item, or retrieve a thingamajig. They're simple, mindless fun to undertake between the story quests. Kairos also features a set of recurring world events that periodically spawn at fixed points. These come in 3 main forms: airship assault, attacking Order ships, destroy their supplies, and wipe out their crew for high tier loot. Creep impact, defend the railgun from waves of creeps while using it to shoot down incoming meteors. And Moxie's Gordello, the Queen of Chaos herself returns with another survival based bloodsport. Take on waves of enemies, kill them within the time limit, and complete bonus challenges. Each of these events has different tiers of rewards, depending on how well you do in them. Along with these events are Rift bosses, another randomly spawning event which has you face off against a boss from a side quest, or one of the many other activities in the game. Beat them for extra loot and XP. Then there's the more structured activities around the world. Safe houses act as your respite in hostile territory, complete with vendors and bounty boards. They're also your fast travel points, making them worth unlocking early. Order silos, meanwhile, function similarly but carry a twist. Capture one, and you'll reveal the location of a nearby vault key fragment. Beyond that are the other points of interest: auger mines, old mining tunnels infested with hostile creatures, capped by a boss fight at the end. Order bunkers, secret underground facilities with their own mini-boss encounters, and Ripper drill sites, self-explanatory chaos pits where you fend off waves of Rippers before facing their boss. They're all built from the same blueprint: arrive, survive, slay, loot. But the individual bosses are well designed enough to keep things fresh. Ancient crawlers provide a nice change of pace. These massive derelict machines are both platforming challenges and combat arenas. To activate one, you'll need to locate a nearby power core, slot it into the crawler, then parkour your way up its rusted frame while fending off whatever factions claimed it that day. Completing them rewards you with cosmetics to change the look of your vehicle. Meanwhile, propaganda stations make a return from Borderlands 3, but this time they're more than a glorified collectible. You'll now have to hack them through your Echo device while surviving multiple waves of enemies. All of these also reward you with SDU tokens, which you can use to increase the capacity of your ammo. Finally, the collectibles, split into 2 categories: loot based and lore based. Loot collectibles are themed by faction and zone. You'll find survivalist caches in the Fate Fields, Electi safes in Carcadia Burn, Augur shrines in the Terminus range, and lost capsules scattered everywhere, which must be returned to the nearest safe house for a payout. Lore collectibles dig deeper into Kairos' history. The standout among them are the Evo Cariums, audio recordings chronicling the story of Nereid, along that siren once imprisoned on Kairos. They're easily the most rewarding bits of lore, as once again, the Iridian story is one of the most interesting and underutilized aspects of Borderlands' overarching narrative. And of course, then there are the vault key fragments. Hidden throughout each zone, they're revealed upon capturing nearby Order silos. Gather 3 from the same region and you'll be able to discover that zone's vault entrance, and the lengthy fight with the awaiting Order forces inside. Why are they in there, you ask? Because the Timekeeper already looted the vaults himself, using their power to build his army. Luckily, he left the vault monsters behind, just to keep things interesting. As a small but much appreciated touch, Gearbox even streamlined the tracking of challenges, making truly 100%ing the game something that's actually attainable. Overall, the world activities in Kairos feel like a natural evolution of Borderlands 3's buffet of content. There's a healthy balance between high-octane combat and quick-hit exploration, keeping the rhythm fresh without ever tipping into busy work. It's dense but not overwhelming, something I wish modern-day Ubisoft would take a few notes on. 6 years after the Moonfall incident, when Lilith's actions brought Elpis into orbit over Kairos and revealed the planet's location to the galaxy, a new generation of Vault Hunters arrives in search of the planet's vault. Unfortunately, the world's current ruler, the Timekeeper, isn't exactly in the mood for visitors. His armies quickly capture the Hunters and implant them with bolt control devices, a networked system allowing him to bend them to his will. Before he can flip the switch, however, the Hunters are rescued by RJ, a member of the Crimson Resistance, a ragtag rebellion fighting to overthrow the Timekeeper's rule. RJ sacrifices himself to block the Timekeeper's control signal, but the act leaves him exposed, and the Timekeeper forces him to end his own life. The Hunters escape to the Resistance's base, where they discover that the group's leader and sole surviving member is Claptrap. Claptrap recruits the Vault Hunters into a reformed Crimson Raiders and sends them across Kairos to rally new allies. Their first stop, the Outbounders, a group of off-world explorers led by Rush, stranded on Kairos since Moonfall. With help from Zadra, a defected Order scientist, the Hunters learn that the Timekeeper has sealed himself within Dominion and that access requires 3 command bolts, held by his lieutenants, Idolator Saul, Vile Lictor, and Callus, the Ripper Queen. The Hunters join the Outbounders to eliminate Idolator Saul, who is developing a bioweapon to wipe them out. They succeed, claim his command bolt, and earn the Outbounders' allegiance. Next, they head to Circadia Burn to aid the Electi, a fractured Order noble house under siege by the Rippers, led by Levane, who rebelled against the Timekeeper by tearing out her own bolts, and an unexpected ally, Zane Flint, crash-landed veteran of the old Crimson Raiders. The Hunters repel the Rippers and pursue Callus across Circadia Burn. Moxie is also here, but she doesn't do much else than stand around in this bar, which is admittedly not much different from her usual behavior. They discover that Callus intends to reach Elpis, believing she can ascend to godhood there. After an intense chase and a climactic battle, the Hunters defeat her, securing her command bolt and winning the loyalty of Levane and the Electi. The final lieutenant, Vile Lictor, is a scientist obsessed with the Siren phenomenon and the Phase Dimension, the metaphysical source of Siren power. Guided by Zadra, the Hunters seek aid from Defiant Calder and his rebel augurs, who task them with retrieving a sacred Iridian relic. When the Hunters recover it, a voice echoes in their minds. Find the Siren. Iridium is the key. This leads them to Amara, who's also on Kairos searching for the missing Lilith. Together, they assault one of Vile Lictor's labs, believing he's experimenting on sirens. Amid collapsing reality, they discover his test subject, a tormented, cybernetically altered RJ, transformed into an artificial siren through Lictor's experiments. After defeating Vile Lictor, the Augurs unite under Calder and join the Crimson Resistance, while RJ escapes, with his mind shattered and his hatred for Lilith festering. Defeating Lictor also lets his vile mutation spawn out in the wild for some additional combat oomph. With all 3 command bolts secured, Zadra reprograms them to unlock the Timekeeper's vault. The problem? It lies within Dominion City, the Timekeeper's stronghold. Amara proposes retrieving Lilith from the Phase to aid in the final assault, using the one known Phase portal located on Elpis. Taking the space elevator built by Callus, the Vault Hunters, alongside Amara and Zane, ascend into orbit, fighting through waves of Rippers and returning cybernetically rebuilt Callus. Amara activates Elpis' core to open the portal, freeing Lilith, who helps them destroy Callus for good. Lilith teleports the team back to Kairos, and a fragment of Elpis crashes down, breaching Dominion City's walls. The final assault begins. The Timekeeper lures the Hunters into a trap, seizing temporary control of their bolts and forcing them to kill Zadra before they break free. Enraged, they storm his fortress and discover his true form, a Vault Guardian masquerading as a god. After a brutal fight, the Vault Hunters destroy him, ending his dominion and freeing Kairos from isolation. With peace, or something like that, restored, the Hunters open the Vault of Kairos. Inside, they find RJ waiting for them, consumed by madness and determined to die fighting. They grant his wish, ending his torment. Within the vault, they encounter a future version of Lilith, who warns them that the universe's end is drawing near. She gives them a mysterious cube, called a Deodand, a final key for survival, before vanishing. Lilith returns the Hunters to Moxie's bar, which now serves as the Crimson Raiders HQ. With Kairos liberated, and the vault still humming beneath its surface, the Vault Hunters prepare for whatever the future, or the end, has in store. For a series best known for guns that scream, explode, or both, Borderlands 4 is surprisingly reflective. Beneath all the noise, it's a story about control, who has it, who wants it, and who's willing to destroy themselves to keep it. The Timekeeper isn't just another villain chasing vault power, he's the logical endpoint of the series' obsession with it. Every major antagonist since Handsome Jack has tried to harness the vaults in some way, but the Timekeeper actually succeeds. He cracks the code, only to prove that ultimate control doesn't bring peace, just stasis. His world is clean, silent, efficient, and dead. Dominion City is what happens when order wins, when chaos is erased entirely. It's a nice thematic mirror to the Crimson Resistance, a faction built on the opposite principle. Claptrap's leadership, if you can call it that, symbolizes everything messy and unpredictable about freedom. Impulsive decisions, reckless heroism, and just enough incompetence to feel human. It's a series quietly acknowledging that the Sword Art has always been the lifeblood of Borderlands. RJ's arc drives this point home. His transformation into an artificial siren, a man literally reconstructed and repurposed by another's will, makes him the story's emotional anchor. He's a product of control run amok, weaponized, broken, and stripped of choice. By the time he attacks our heroes at the end of the game, it's not out of evil, but despair. A desperate attempt to take back agency in a universe that's already decided his fate. His death feels less like a victory and more like mercy. There's also a subtle commentary running beneath all of this, one that feels aimed squarely at the Borderlands franchise itself. Borderlands 4 constantly wrestles with the idea of repetition. The vault opens, chaos follows, the hero leaves, and the cycle begins again. Even the ending, with future Lilith warning of the universe's collapse, suggests that all of this, the looting, the shooting, the chasing of power, might just be part of a loop that none of them can break. That cyclical nature is mirrored in the player experience too. The adaptive world, the repeatable events, the endless loot treadmill. It's the same loop we've been running for 15 years. Only now the game seems aware of it. There's a certain self-awareness in how it frames the end of the universe, as both a plot point and a meta nod to the series itself nearing a natural limit. But that's what makes Borderlands 4 so interesting. It's not cynical, and it's not hopeless. If anything, it's about acceptance. The Timekeeper tries to freeze time. The Vault Hunters embrace it. They keep moving, keep fighting, not because they expect to win forever, but because it's all they know, and all they need to. And, for a game that's all about blowing things up, that's surprisingly poetic. But, as every Borderlands veteran knows, credits don't mean the end, they just mean the tutorial's finally over. Once you've put the Timekeeper in the dirt, Borderlands 4 does what the series always does best: hand you a new list of ways to make numbers go up. The biggest post-story addition is the specialization system, a secondary account-wide skill tree that functions much like Borderlands 2's Badass rank and 3's Guardian rank. You'll start earning specialization points the moment you finish the main campaign, but the progress carries across every character on your profile. So, if you've spent 80 hours pumping Rafa full of upgrades and decide to start fresh with Vex, you'll still have access to specialization progress from the get-go. Both trees level simultaneously, which gives early game characters an immediate sense of power progression without breaking balance. The tree begins simple, with 4 base nodes that offer familiar bonuses: higher max health, more weapon damage, faster reload, and so on. But as you invest deeper into a node, you'll start unlocking passive specialization skills that stack on top of your Vault Hunter's personal trees. Push even further and you'll reach the prestige nodes, powerful upgrades that turn your build from efficient into illegal. Returning alongside it is Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, though it's been overhauled once again. Instead of forcing you into a fresh playthrough, BL4's UVHM exists as a modular challenge system layered on top of your save. Each UVHM tier introduces a new set of world challenges, like beating bosses from specific activities or quests. Clear them all, return to Lilith, and she'll let you undertake one of the takedown missions to unlock the new UVHM tier. Rinse and repeat until you reach UVHM 5, at which point the game essentially stops pretending to care about your sanity. It's a surprisingly elegant way of handling difficulty escalation without erasing progress. You're not rerunning the same story missions for the 10th time, you're retesting your build under harsher conditions. Then there's Moxxi's Encore, the game's new boss replay system. For a small fee, and I mean less than you spend on ammo in a single fight small, you can re-challenge any boss in the game from their dedicated terminal. It's convenient, it's efficient, and it saves everyone the ritual of fast traveling halfway across the planet just to punch an old boss in the face. And now, for the most confusing system in the history of confusing systems, Flint's firmware. I'll be honest, I completely blacked out halfway through the tutorial, but according to the ever trustworthy Borderlands wiki, loot with firmware begins dropping at level 25 and can appear on class mods, enhancements, ordnance, rep kits, and shields. Loot with firmware begins to drop after the player reaches level 25 and can appear on class mods, enhancements, ordnance, rep kits, and shields. Every equipped item with the same firmware increases their effects to a maximum of 3. When the game's main story is complete, a firmware transfer machine becomes available that allows firmware to be moved from one piece of gear to another of the same type, for a combined cost of money and iridium. The item firmware is being copied from is destroyed, and any existing firmware on the item being copied to is lost. Got all that? Good, because I'm not explaining it again. But essentially, you see this blue shit? You can copy that onto any item of the same type. Should've just made that the tutorial. As of launch, Borderlands 4's endgame feels a little sparse. The foundation's solid, specializations are a strong progression hook, UVHM is better integrated, and boss replays make farming painless. But there's still room for more, and Gearbox seem aware of it. Pearlescent tier gear and invincible bosses are already in the pipeline, and there's also plenty of paid content coming. 2 full story DLCs, a Vault Hunter named Cash, and another we haven't gotten info on, 4 bounty packs including a Christmas themed one, and the usual avalanche of cosmetics. I'll probably bundle all of it into a separate video sometime in 2026. Assuming my hard drive hasn't exploded by then. Borderlands 4 isn't the loudest, flashiest, or funniest entry in the series, but it's the one that finally learned when to stop yelling. After 15 years of excess, of bigger guns, bigger worlds, and bigger punchlines, Gearbox has finally found balance. The result is a game that feels less like a sequel and more like a culmination, a fusion of everything the series has ever done right, cleaned up, tightened down, and given purpose. The gunplay is sharper, the pacing smoother, and the writing less desperate for attention. Even the humor feels mature. It's not trying to make you laugh every 5 seconds, but it's confident enough to let the absurdity of the universe speak for itself. Kairos might just be the most cohesive world Gearbox has ever built. It's massive, but not empty. Busy, but not bloated. Everything feels like it belongs. Part of a single, interconnected ecosystem rather than a grab bag of random content. The story, for all its twists and cosmic theatrics, still finds humanity where it matters. RJ's tragedy, Lilith's return, the Timekeeper's obsession, they all orbit around the same theme: control versus freedom. It's a story about learning to live with chaos, not conquer it, which, in its own strange way, feels like the most Borderlands message possible. Of course, it's not perfect. The endgame's a bit thin at launch, the UI still occasionally feels like it was designed by a caffeinated raccoon, and the Flint's firmware tutorial might actually be a war crime under the Geneva Convention. But none of that changes the fact that Borderlands 4 plays better than any entry before it. It's confident, consistent, and most importantly, fun as hell. Not the kind of fun that burns out after a week of loot grinding, but the kind that reminds you of why you fell in love with the series in the first place. If Borderlands 3 was the series tripping over itself, Borderlands 4 is it standing tall again. A final, refined explosion that proves sometimes the best kind of chaos is the kind you can control. And that about wraps up Borderlands 4, a game that, against all odds, managed to make me believe Gearbox finally learned something. Restraint. If you made it all the way through, thank you, seriously. These projects take a lot of time, and knowing people actually sit down and watch me ramble about imaginary loot for half an hour makes it all worth it. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like and a comment helps more than you might think, and if you really enjoyed it, subscribing makes sure you won't miss the next one. There's plenty more on the way, and I already have a few ideas cooking for what's next, maybe something less gun themed. All my other links are down below. Until next time, I've been Xenivus. More videos soon. Ish.